Go ahead.
Okay. Hey y'all, this is editing Jasmine. So listen, what had happened was last week somehow I accidentally uploaded episode 2 in episode 1 slot. So the title was what episode 1 was supposed to be, but the audio was episode 2. So the information in the pictures was not matching. And I was wondering why y'all was listening but not commenting. And then I realized that I made a mistake. So this episode is the Detroit Principals kickback scheme. So when you hear about, oh, we're back from the break, that's because this was supposed to be episode 1, but we're just gonna leave it episode 2, and the Atlanta episode will just still be episode 1, and I'll just go ahead and change everything. So my bad for the confusion. Gonna be sure to pay attention to that moving forward. But yeah, this is now episode 2 instead of episode 1. So yeah, happy listening.
Okay.
You are now listening to Black Coffee, Crime and Crochet, a true crime podcast where cozy meets criminal, hosted by Jasmine C.L. Prince. Grab your yarn, pour up an iced coffee, let's sit through the chaos.
Hey y'all, welcome back to another episode of Black Coffee, Crime and Crochet, the cozy true crime podcast where we sip, stitch, and spill the stories behind the scams. I am your host, Jasmine C.L. Prince. If you are new here, welcome. And if you are OG, thank y'all for being here with me again. It is a new month, another month. We've been gone on break, but we are back and we are kicking off not only season 2 of the show, which is still crazy, but also a brand new series. This month, we are going back to school. Not for learning, though, but for larceny. I'm calling this series Scandal in the Schools, and over the next few weeks, we're diving into stories where principals, superintendents, and school board members got caught up in some very extracurricular activities. And I don't mean student clubs, y'all, at all. From pandemic fraud to bribery to textbook schemes that had nothing to do with education, we're exposing the folks who turned the classroom into a cash grab. And today, we're starting off with one of the wildest. Over a dozen school principals and an assistant superintendent in Detroit public schools all caught up in a scheme with a shady vendor who bribed them to the tune of nearly $3 million. These folks were taking cash, gift cards, furniture, and shopping trips while their schools struggled to keep the lights on. So, if you're ready to sip and stitch through a story full of betrayal, broken trust, and bad report cards from grown folk, you already know what to do. Grab your hook, pour you some iced coffee, and let's get into the scandal. Okay, so for our iced drink recipe, we have a dirty vanilla matcha iced latte with sweet cream cold foam. So what you'll need, 3 teaspoons of sweetened matcha or 1 teaspoon unsweetened and plus 1 to 2 pumps of vanilla syrup, 1 to 2 shots of instant blind espresso or your espresso pods or however you want to do it, or cold brew concentrate for a milder vibe, half cup almond milk or your milk of choice, a fourth cup water for dissolving the matcha, ice, of course, because we don't do warm drinks around here, and then sweet cream cold foam. You can either use the cans or half and half, plus a splash of vanilla syrup, and then froth until foamy. So, assembly. Prepare your dirty base. So, mix your matcha powder with hot water until it's smooth, and then add in your vanilla syrup. If you're using it for unsweetened or just for more sweet, add in your vanilla then. Then add your espresso shot or your cold brew right into the matcha and stir that up. And then pour your almond milk or milk of choice over that mix and stir again. Then in a separate glass, the glass that you're going to drink out of, fill it with ice and then pour the dirty matcha mix over the top of the ice and then top it with your sweet cream cold foam. And then y'all know I like to be extra around here, so you can garnish the top with a little sprinkle of matcha or cinnamon. So that is the ice drink of the week. And then for our crochet, we're doing an update instead of a project. So listen, don't come for me. I know I said during season 1 that I was making my husband a polo. I actually really did finally find one that I liked, and we are making a lot of progress. It's taking me a long time though, because I'm using a 3mm hook. So it's, that takes a lot of work. So right now I have the whole back panel done, one sleeve, and one of the front panels. So what I have left is the other front panel, the other sleeve, and to attach the buttons and the collar. So we're getting there, but we still got a ways to go. And then also during the break, I made our daughter a half bluey, half bingo hexicardie for her birthday, which she loved. So I'll probably post a picture of that on Instagram. So if you're not following me on Instagram, I'm at Black Coffee Crime Crochet there on Instagram and TikTok. You can find me there too. So if you want to see what that looks like, go ahead and head over to my socials and you can see what that looks like. But yeah, enough of the pre-gaming stuff. We are about to get into the story because I know a lot of y'all don't like to hear the gab, but we're past it all. Y'all got the updates. So let's get into this crazy, crazy story. All right, so background: a vendor, a scheme, and a breach of trust. So when you think of the most loyal, loving, kind-hearted, and compassionate people, what field comes to mind? So like y'all probably think of a lot of different professions, right? But I'm sure at some point teachers crossed your mind, right? Teachers work with our youth every day, creating safe and nurturing classrooms that feel like second homes. As someone who used to be a teacher, this is definitely very true. They educate and guide and inspire and just do all of the things. And help the kids through, some of the most important stages of their lives. Yet one thing many of us can agree on is that teachers are not paid what they truly deserve for the pivotal role they play in shaping future generations. And teachers aren't the only ones. It takes a whole faculty, the administrators, support staff, and leadership at the top to make the school thrive. Schools come in many forms: public and private, nature-based, STEM-focused, overcrowded schools fighting to keep up, and others fortunate enough to flourish. No matter the type, every school relies on the dedication of those who pour their hearts into education. But before we get into the people involved, let's set the scene. So, Detroit, in Wayne County, Michigan, is home to nearly 630,000 people. The Detroit Public Schools Community District serves over 52,500 students across 108 schools. In recent years, the district has made real progress in many areas, likely in part because of the very issues we're about to explore. But challenges remain. 19 schools are operating at less than 25% capacity, putting serious strain on finances. And while Detroit's public schools are meant to be open and available to all, this story shows that in times of need, there can be so much greed. But what happens when greed, schemes, and scandal infect a school district already on the brink? When the fight for money and resources hides a darker truth, that the crisis itself was an inside job. Trusted leaders pocketed funds meant for classrooms, leaving kids to suffer while the community thought it was only battling poverty and politics. In reality, the system was being eaten from within. Well, this actually happened. It began as a secret arrangement buried within the financial chaos of Detroit's public school system. So today, we're diving into one of the biggest school scandals out there. A story where greed and betrayal made their way right into the halls that were supposed to protect kids. In the end, the investigation pulled in a whole cast of characters: 12 principals, an assistant superintendent, and a vendor named Norman Schott. Before I go any further, y'all will see the pictures that I post of all the players, and the main person, the vendor, Norman Shy, is a white man. So I don't want y'all to be like, hey, what's going on? The majority of the 12 principals are black. So I am staying with the theme of the show. It just so happened that the vendor is a white man, but I wanted to focus on the principals because they were the ones who were actually in the schools. So keep that in mind when y'all see the pictures of all the players. But as we go along, we'll walk you through who they were and just how much money they managed to pocket. This wasn't just your average case of corruption. It was a group of people who turned a struggling school system into their own personal payday. So at the center of it all, like I said, was Norman Shy, a 74-year-old school supply vendor who owned Allstate Sales. His game plan was simple but devious. Principals would approve phony invoices for supplies that were either never delivered or only partially delivered, and in return, Shy would pay them bribes out of the proceeds. The so-called supplies range from auditorium chairs to teaching materials and special paper, items the schools never actually received. As an approved DPS vendor, Norman Shy turned the procurement process into his personal money machine, fueled by kickbacks. This wasn't a quick scam either. It literally ran for 13 years, from 2002 to 2015, while Detroit schools were already drowning in financial crisis and crumbling facilities. Teachers were forced to do more with less, even as resources were siphoned away. It all stayed hidden until a federal probe finally pulled back the curtain, revealing a scandal that reads like a true crime saga inside a public school system. So let's get into the cast of characters, which are the principals and officials caught in the net. So, like I said before, Norman Shy was the mastermind behind the facade, but over the course of this 13-year scandal, he certainly wasn't acting alone. Right now, we're going to dive into the numbers, the money, and just how jaw-dropping this whole scheme really was and who was involved. So, like we said, at the helm or the forefront, the mastermind, the puppet master, Norman Shy, owner of Allstate Sales, which was a school supply vendor, age 74 of Franklin, Michigan. He paid out roughly $908 million in bribes to school officials and received about $2.7 million from DPS through fraudulent invoices. We will get into all of the details later, but that's a lot of money. Then we have Clara Flowers, former principal of Henderson Academy and at the time an assistant superintendent of specialized student services, age 61. She took $324,785 in kickbacks. Then Beverly Campbell, former principal of Rosa Parks Elementary and Greenfield Union Elementary Middle, age 66. She took about $50,000 in bribes. Clara Smith, principal of Thurgood Elementary Middle, age 67, took about $194,000 in kickbacks. Then we have Gerlma Johnson, former principal of Drew Academy and then principal of Earhart Elementary Middle, age 56, took about $22,884,000. James Hearn, principal of Marcus Garvey Academy, age 50, took about $11,500. Josette Buendia, principal of Bennett Elementary, age 50, took about $45,775. Nina Graves Hicks, former principal of Davis Aerospace High School, age 52, took about $27,385. Ronald Alexander, which this name probably sounds familiar to you, principal of Spain Elementary Middle, age 60, took about $23,000. Ronnie Sims, former principal of Fleming Elementary and Brenda Scott Middle, age 55, took about $58,519. Stanley Johnson, principal of Hutchinson Elementary, age 62, took about $84,170. Tanya Bowman, former principal of Osborne Collegiate Academy of Math, Science, and Tech, age 48, took about $12,500. And Tavion Moore Patton, principal of Jerry L. White Carter High School, age 46, took about $4,000. And then Wiley Purcell, former principal of Thurgood Marshall Elementary, age 65, took about $50,000. So let's get into how the fraud worked. We have fake invoices, bribes, and easy money. So if y'all add all of that up, that is a lot of coin. And you can see some who took thousands and some who took hundreds of thousands of dollars. They found a way to cheat the system, to fill their pockets and somehow go home and sleep at night like everything's fine and return to the school they're stealing from, which I don't understand how they could. If you've been curious on just how someone can get away with this and make this happen in the first place, I'm going to tell you that right now. But remember, they didn't get away with it. They slipped by for a while, but in time, it all caught up to them. All right, so here is how this kickback scheme actually worked. It's literally both crazy simple and completely sneaky. Norman Shy's company would send Detroit Public Schools invoices for supplies that either never showed up, like I said before, or only came in part. Think dozens of auditorium chairs or pallets of paper that were supposed to arrive at a school, but didn't. To make it look legit, the principal in on the scheme would sign off on the invoice, basically certifying that the goods were delivered when they weren't. DPS trusted its principals, so they'd pay Shy's company, no questions asked. And what did the principals get for playing along? A cut of the money, of course. Bribes and kickbacks from Shy taken straight out of the payments DPS had made on the fake invoices. And Shy kept it organized. He literally kept detailed records of who owed what and what had been paid. In fact, when the FBI searched his house, they found 20 manila folders, each one tracking a different bribery arrangement. One folder even had a full ledger for Principal Buendia listing her kickbacks and gift card requests. It was basically a business operation, just illegal. The amounts were staggering, especially for a district already strapped for cash. Shy billed DPS about $2.7 million over the years. Around $908,000 of that went to the school officials and bribes, and the rest, nearly $1.8 million, Shy kept for himself. I think before when I said the number, I said $908 million. If I said that, I didn't mean that. I meant $908,000. Every fake invoice dollar coming out of the district's budget funneled straight into pockets instead of classrooms. And some of the stories are wild. Take Clara Flowers, a district administrator. She didn't just take cash or gift cards. Shy even paid contractors to renovate her house, y'all, as part of her kickbacks. They apparently met regularly to tally up what she was owed, with Shy keeping careful notes in his ledger. Other principals had their own methods: prepaid debit cards, checks written to third parties, even funneling money into school-related accounts they controlled. But no matter the form, it was all siphoned straight from the schools. So how long it lasted and how it unraveled. One of the craziest parts of this entire scandal to me is the timeline of it all. Because from 2002 to 2015, so many people come and go from employment at these schools. That's 13 years that this went on. The majority of people involved in the scheme were principals of the schools. The average salary of a principal in Detroit is $106,000, whereas the average salary of a teacher in Detroit is $54,000. That's literally less than half. So you're signing invoices of chairs and papers that these teachers who make half of what you make absolutely need. And statistically, it's proven that teachers spend their own money on supplies for their students in classrooms, but you just taking the money. Like, come, please make it make sense, because it's not at all. So while Detroit schools were going through multiple superintendents and even state appointed emergency managers, this kickback scheme quietly ran under the radar. DPS was cutting programs, begging for funding, and trying to keep classrooms afloat while money was being siphoned off right under their noses. So, how did it go unnoticed for so long? The scheme was decentralized, happening at the individual school level. Principals had a lot of autonomy and very little oversight. A few $1,000s here or there in a giant district budget didn't raise alarms, and the chaos of DPS worked perfectly as cover. The unraveling started when federal investigators began probing corruption in Detroit area schools. In 2014, the FBI and IRS searched Norman Shive's home and found stacks of manila folders, ledgers detailing kickbacks, names, dates, and payoffs. That was the smoking gun. A 2-year investigation followed. Agents traced the fake invoices from DPS accounts to Shive's business and then out to the school officials. By March 2016, the case was ready and it was go time. So on March 29th, U.S. Attorney Barbara McQuaid announced charges: 12 principals, 1 assistant superintendent, and Shive himself. For a district already struggling financially, it was described as a punch in the gut. The decades-long scheme had finally been exposed, and the conspirators would face justice. I first heard about this case watching American Greed, and it was funny because once the FBI found all of the stacks, I believe this is how it went. Once the FBI found the manila folders in Shive's home, Shive then turned on them, on the principals, and started working with the FBI, and he started recording his meetings with the principals and administrators. So you see on these tapes him meeting with each one, and I'm talking about, yeah, I need, this, that, and the third. Like, it was all caught on tape because Shive was trying to save himself and ended up working with the FBI to catch the principals, which was crazy. So, literally, how did this happen under the radar? So the kickback scandal really exposed some serious holes in how Detroit public schools ran things. For 13 years, principals were able to game the system, proof that checks and balances were basically broken. Principals had the power to pick vendors and sign off on deliveries. On paper, that's supposed to help schools get what they need fast. In practice, however, it meant a principal could approve and confirm an order, like 100 chairs that never arrived, without anyone actually checking. There were no surprise audits, inventory checks, or oversight strong enough to catch it. Part of the problem was DPS's financial chaos. The district was drowning in debt, over $3 billion by 2016, and went through multiple emergency managers starting in 2009. Leadership turnover and a focus on cutting costs meant less attention on internal fraud. Norman Shive's company, Allstate Sales, billed schools about $5 million over the years, $2.7 million of it fraudulent, and nobody seemed to question it. The scammers clearly thought they were untouchable. Are you understanding the gravity of this scam yet, y'all? Allstate billed $5 million, and he took $2.7 million. He literally took over half. So when the scandal finally came to light, DPS's reform leadership acted fast. Stephen Rhodes, the transition manager, called the principals' actions reprehensible and suspended all school-based purchasing. From then on, big spending had to go through higher level approval. They also cooperated fully with law enforcement and tried to recover the stolen funds. The takeaway: when a district is in financial crisis and oversight is weak, unscrupulous people can exploit the system. Detroit's scandal is a cautionary tale. Strong auditing, clear rules, and a culture of ethics are essential to protect public schools and the students they serve. So, this scandal was about more than money. It was a deep betrayal of public trust. School leaders, People trusted to protect and educate children were lining their own pockets with kickbacks for supplies that never even arrived. U.S. Attorney Barbara McQuaid called it a heavy blow to public confidence, while FBI agent David Glale said to enrich oneself at the expense of school children is reprehensible. The outrage wasn't just legal, it was moral. A quote I heard from the American Greed podcast coverage, Norman Shai, and these school scandals said it perfectly. A man had a 2-story library in his home and was stealing from schools who couldn't afford books. Listen, y'all, okay, so if you watch American Greed, catch the episode. If not, like I said, they have the podcast of this episode. It's really good, but that was one of the quotes from that episode, and it's so true. Take Charles L. Spain Elementary Middle School as an example. The building was literally falling apart. Moldy gyms, crumbling roofs, hallways used for PE. Yet Principal Ronald Alexander had allegedly pocketed about $23,000 over the years from supplies that never reached the school. That money could have patched roofs, bought new computers, or supported teachers, but instead it went to personal spending like shopping, restaurants, and home improvements. Across 13 schools, roughly $2.7 million was stolen, making the students the ultimate victims. The betrayal hit hard. Teachers who had protested for better supplies were furious to learn some principals had worsened the problem. Parents and students felt the sting too, a profound breach of trust. Some principals tried to justify the kickbacks as donations for the school, but legally and morally, that excuse just doesn't hold. At its core, this scandal is a cautionary tale, like I said. It shows how greed can corrode public trust, how financial crisis can make schools vulnerable, and why strong oversight and accountability are critical to protecting students and their education. So, when the kickback scheme came to light in spring 2016, Detroit's reaction was immediate and fierce. Parents and students were angry and disillusioned. The timing couldn't have been worse. DPS was on the brink of running out of money to pay teachers, and lawmakers were debating a $715 million bailout. The idea that over a dozen officials had been skimming funds for years made many question whether pouring more money into DPS was even worth it. Talk radio and community meetings quickly labeled the charged principals as faces of shame. City and state leaders responded with outrage and action. DPS transition manager Stephen Rhodes called the scheme reprehensible and immediately tightened oversight. And then Governor Snyder had just pushed through emergency funding to keep schools open, but the scandal fueled calls for deeper reforms. Lawmakers emphasized, don't punish the 47,000 students for the misdeeds of 13 adults, which absolutely, yes, I'm glad somebody said that. Teachers and union leaders were vindicated. Finally, there was proof of the corruption they had long suspected. Parents voiced anger at school board meetings, some filing lawsuits to recover misused funds. Yet amid the outrage, there was also a push to rebuild. Community leaders highlighted that most principals were honest and committed, and reforms followed. DPS hired an inspector general, audits of vendors' contracts began, and calls for a full forensic review of finances grew louder. Even as trust had been shaken, Detroit showed resilience, as they always do. Volunteers, businesses, and committed educators stepped in to support schools, sending a message. Students should not pay the price for adults' greed. The scandal was a punch to the gut, but it also became a catalyst for reform and a reminder that the city schools and the kids they serve were worth fighting for. So the part we've all been waiting for, kind of the legal aftermath. Let's get into these trials, plea deals, and sentencing, child. The legal consequences for the individuals involved were significant, as they should be. Federal prosecutors treated this as a major public corruption case, and most of the defendants eventually pleaded guilty rather than face trial. So here is a rundown of each person's outcome, including plea deals, sentences, and even notable penalties, and any notable penalties. So Norman Scheid, the vendor, pleaded guilty in May 2016 to charges of conspiracy to defraud the United States via federal program bribery and tax evasion. In September 2016, Scheid was sentenced to 5 years, 60 months in federal prison. He was also ordered to pay approximately $2.7 million in restitution to DPS, essentially the full amount of the fraudulent invoices, and $51,667 in back taxes to the IRS. After prison, he was to serve 2 years of supervised release. Scheid, who was 74 at sentencing, reportedly told the court, quote, "I made a horrible mistake," and agreed to cooperate with federal investigators as part of his plea deal. His cooperation likely helped build cases against others, which is what I was telling y'all with the American Greed episode. He cooperated and was recording his meetings with all the other people involved. So then we have Clara Flowers. She pleaded guilty to conspiracy and tax evasion. The highest paid official in the scheme, she was sentenced in September 2016 to 3 years in prison in order to repay $324,785 in kickbacks. Flowers had funneled money into her travel business and home improvements. While she showed remorse, the judge slammed her for betraying the public trust. Beverly Campbell pleaded guilty to conspiracy in April 2016. She pocketed about $50,000 and was sentenced in October to 15 months in prison plus restitution. At 67, she apologized, serving a sentence in line with the other principals caught taking tens of thousands. Clara Smith, principal, took the largest bribe of any principal, around $194,000. She cooperated with prosecutors but still received 2 years in prison, 1 year of supervised release, and had to repay the full amount. Smith admitted spending the money on furniture, cruises, and casinos and apologized in court, but the judge insisted prison was necessary to send a clear message. As it was. Yes, it was. It was. Gerlma Johnson, principal, took nearly $23,000 in kickbacks and was sentenced to 1 year in prison plus restitution. She claimed some of the money was meant for students, but the judge made it clear stealing from the school is a violation, no excuses. Then James Hearn, another principal, took $11,500 in kickbacks and got 10 months in prison, 1 year supervised release plus restitution. At 51, Hearn admitted full responsibility and the court gave him a slight break for cooperating. Nina Graves Hicks, principal, took $27,000 in gift cards from Scheid and got just over a year in prison plus restitution. Her cooperation helped, but the sentence still sent a clear message. No one skims from schools without consequences. Ronnie Sims, principal, took over $58,000 in kickbacks and got 15 months in prison plus full restitution. Retired or not, the judge made it clear leaving DPS didn't shield anyone from consequences. Ronald Alexander, principal, took $23,000 in kickbacks and got 12 months in prison, 2 years supervised release plus restitution. Despite citing caregiving for his elderly mother, the judge noted he spent some of the money on personal luxuries, making it clear misusing school funds has consequences. Stanley Johnson, principal, took $84,000 in kickbacks and was sentenced to 15 months in prison, even after repaying the full amount and apologizing. The judge made it clear prior high-profile corruption didn't excuse his actions. Prison was still necessary, which I think is wild. 15 months, but he had already repaid it, and I don't know. Prison, yes, but 15 months after he already repaid it is, I don't know. I'm not a judge, so I'm gonna leave it at that. Tanya Brown principal took $12,500 in kickbacks and got 9 months in prison plus full repayment, which is what I'm saying. Maybe because of the amount. Maybe that's why. Because she only got 9 months. But like I said, maybe it's the amount. So she got 9 months in prison plus full repayment. Even a small bribe carried real consequences, showing no one's immune, young or new to the job. Tiavon Moore Patton principal took the smallest kickback, about $4,000, and got 6 months in prison, 1 year supervised release plus restitution. Even a small payoff carried real consequences. No bribe was too small to escape justice. Wiley Pearsall principal took $50,000 in kickbacks and got 15 months in prison plus full restitution. The judge noted her gambling issues and ordered treatment, but made it clear misusing school funds has serious consequences. Then we have Josetta Buendia, principal. She was the only principal to fight the charges. Buendia took about $45,000 in gift cards and cash. She argued much went to her school, but a jury convicted her on all counts. In April 2017, she was sentenced to 2 years in prison in order to repay $45,775. Her appeal failed. Spending stolen money on students doesn't excuse bribery, which is crazy. Everybody else took a deal, but she thought that since she allegedly spent most of it on her students, that she would get off. But no. Like I said, she was convicted on all counts, including conspiracy to commit bribery and federal program bribery. Like, it's crazy because evidence at the trial included Shy's detailed ledger of kickbacks to her, which proved that from 2011 to 2015, she knowingly submitted fraudulent invoices and took the kickback money regardless of how she spent it. So, yeah, girl, yeah. But then the fact that she appealed was crazy. So, yeah. She served her 2-year sentence and was released thereafter. So in the end, everyone charged faced consequences. Most principals got around a year in prison, but the real heavy hitters were Shy, 5 years, and Flowers, 3. Restitution orders aimed to claw back the stolen money, with Shy required to repay the full $2.7 million to DPS. Some also faced supervised release and penalties for tax evasion. Defendants tried to argue their years of service or the tough district conditions deserve leniency, but the judge made it clear corruption won't be tolerated. Quote, "If there is a message here," said U.S. Attorney McQuaid, "someone is watching. You will get caught and you will go to prison." So justice was served and a warning sent loud and clear. The legal outcomes thus close a dark chapter with a measure of justice and a warning to others. So, aftermath and where they are now. Since the 2016 revelations and 2017 sentences, Detroit schools have been working to pick up the pieces, financially and just as importantly, in terms of public trust. The people caught up in the kickback scheme have all served their time and moved on, though the shadow of their convictions follows them. So here's what we know or can reasonably guess about what happened after prison and how the district has tried to recover from one of the most shocking scandals in its history. So restitution and district recovery. One tangible silver lining is that Detroit schools have recovered a portion of the stolen funds through restitution. Norman Shy, for instance, began making large restitution payments. By late 2017, while serving his sentence, Shy had paid about $1.56 million of the $2.7 million he owed back to the district. His remaining balance was expected to be paid over time, potentially from the sale of assets. Shy had led a lavish lifestyle. He owned a mansion with a movie theater and pool, which he sold possibly to help satisfy the judgment. The other defendants' restitution payments, though smaller, also contributed. DPS, now the Detroit Public Schools Community District, after restructuring, could finally put those funds towards the students. While 2.7 million can't single-handedly fix the system, it certainly helped with a district that counts every dollar. DPSCD officials in 2017 publicly welcomed the restitution as a step toward healing the breach and investing in classrooms. Norman Shai was roughly 75 when he went to prison in 2016. He served his 5-year term at a federal facility, likely with some time off for good behavior, meaning he would have been released around late 2020. As of 2021, Shai would have completed his term and his subsequent supervised release period. Now about 84 years old, Shai has kept a very low profile. There have been no high-profile interviews or public statements from him after his apology at sentencing. It's reasonable to assume he is retired from any business activity. One of the lasting images of Shai was him leaving the courthouse after pleading guilty, stone-faced and saying nothing to reporters. That silence has more or less continued. He faded from the headlines after doing his time. However, his name lives on in Detroit as a symbol of vendor corruption. Procurement officials in Michigan have cited the Shai case in seminars as a warning example of fraud. Now, the principals. All the principals have now served their time and been released. By mid-2018, everyone who took a plea deal was out, with Josetta Buendia likely released in 2019 after her 2-year term and failed appeals. None returned to Detroit public schools. Felony convictions effectively bar them from working in public education, and most were near retirement anyway. Some may have lost pension benefits, though details vary. Since then, most have kept low profiles. Clara Smith and Stanley Johnson completed supervised release quietly in the Detroit suburbs. Ronald Alexander focused on caring for his elderly mother and hasn't taken another public role, hoping people remember his decades of work. Tanya Bowman and others largely disappeared from public view, prioritizing family and privacy. Claire Flowers, once a top official, also stepped away, avoiding the media entirely. The common thread? Life after prison is quiet, far from positions of trust. Detroit, meanwhile, has shifted its focus, trying to move forward rather than dwell on the past. So like I said, Detroit public school reforms. After the scandal, DPS, now DPSCD, tightened financial controls. By 2018, audits showed fewer issues and stronger oversight. An ethics hotline was launched for whistleblowers, and a compliance officer now vets all vendor contracts. The district turned the nightmare into a lesson, closing the loopholes Shai and the principals exploited. While challenges remain, DPSCD is now far more alert to internal corruption risks. Wider impact, the Detroit kickback scandal sent shockwaves beyond the city. Education officials nationwide took notice, sparking efforts to strengthen oversight in school procurement. The U.S. Attorney's Office emphasized that they would prosecute anyone trying to profit at the expense of students, and the FBI's Detroit Corruption Task Force continues monitoring public institutions. The case has become a cautionary tale in school administration. Greed can infiltrate even notable professions, and transparency and accountability are essential. So as we wrap this up, here is the takeaway. It's a story of betrayal, but also of accountability. Educators broke the trust placed in them, but the system and the community stepped up. The kickback schemers served time, repaid stolen funds, and justice was done. Detroit schools keep moving forward, proving that even after a dark chapter, the focus stays on the students. The lesson? Public school money is for the kids, and anyone who steals from their future will be held accountable. You know what? We're just getting started on. So, we are just getting started on this Scandal in the School series. Today's episode was a wild ride: greed, money-hungry schemes, and betrayal. But next week, we got even more. But before I go out, I just wanted to go back to the Spain elementary. What was his name? He's the one that took, I think, 23,000. Let me go back to the top. Okay, Ronald Alexander. I'm about to look it up because I'm pretty sure they were the ones who went on the Ellen show. Asking for money, and he was stealing all along. Hold on, y'all. Yeah. It was him. So he was featured on the Ellen DeGeneres show in relation to okay, here it is. So he won the Ellen Prize. What did he win? Here it is. So he won $500,000 giveaway on the Ellen DeGeneres show. They still would have needed it, but I hope that whole $500,000 actually went to the schools. I probably could look into it more and see if it did, but this is already getting long. But you think doing bribes and stuff, you would want to keep a low profile, but apparently not. He wanted to be in the limelight, and that probably did not help his case at all. But yeah. So we are back. This was the end of the first episode of this series. Next week is even crazier. Well, I don't know if it's even crazier than that, but next week is crazy. We are going to Atlanta next week. So, and it's a doubleheader. So y'all please come back and listen to what scandals Atlanta got into. But yeah, I think I'm just making sure I'm going through everything because it's been a minute. I'm out of practice. But thank y'all for being patient with me while I was on break. A lot of stuff happened over the summer and I'm just now in a place where I can get back to recording. But I appreciate y'all's patience. My views did not go down. I was still getting comments. I was still getting streams. And for me to be new to this is just the beginning of season 2, and to have consistent streams, I'm very appreciative. This just started off as a dream, and for it being a reality and y'all supporting me, I just want y'all to know that it doesn't go unnoticed, and I don't take it for granted that y'all are still rocking with me. I very much appreciate it. Y'all keep me going, and I'm excited for season 2. So, sip or spill prompt. Was this just a few bad apples or a reflection of a system that's too easy to exploit? Please drop your take in the comments if you're listening on Spotify. Apple, I don't think you can. Also on YouTube, if you're listening over there, please drop a comment. So yeah, I told y'all we was coming in hot. Okay. So, if you love this episode, please do me a favor, leave a 5-star review on Spotify or Apple. It helps more cozy crime lovers find the show. Please leave a comment. I do read them all. I do respond to them all. And if you are interested in getting episodes ahead of time, I do have a Patreon. It's patreon.com/Black Coffee Crime Crochet. So you can become a member for that. And then for recipes, updates, and crime and crochet chaos all week long, please follow me on socials. I am at Black Coffee Crime Crochet everywhere. And yeah, thanks for sipping with me. I will see y'all next Tuesday for part 2 of Scandal in the Schools. Until then, stay cozy, stay curious, stay sipping. Bye.
Disclaimer. Great effort is made to ensure that all materials used in Black Coffee Crime and Crochet adhere to fair use guidelines. No copyright infringement is intended. If you are the copyright owner I represent the owner of any material used in this content and have concerns about its use, please contact me and I will promptly address the issue.